springs the trap. A sniper kills one of their own young soldiers to manufacture the inciting incident, and the massacre that follows is swift, merciless, and meticulous, a systematic wipeout of the Gorman people. It's one of the most difficult to watch sequences in all of Star Wars for how brutally it portrays genocide not as chaos, but as cold, calculated, state-sanctioned policy.
We are under siege. We're being slaughtered. The imperial murder of Gorman has begun. There are hundreds of bodies this moment. As I say these words, hundreds of murdered Gorman lay dead in Vamo Plaza. Thousands more on the streets, more every minute. We're being destroyed. This is Gorman reaching for any open channel that can hear me. If you can hear me, if you believe in truth, if you have any faith left in truth, please mark this message and pass it forward. This is murder! The Empire built this fire. They made this fire and led us to the slaughter. Now they expect us to die without knowing why. The conspiracy we feared is real. It's here today. Imperial ships are already landing atop. Help us! Is there no one who can help us? Is there no one?
The real-world parallels are impossible to ignore. Tiananmen Square, Bloody Sunday, the Armistice Massacre, numerous others. Even the King David hotel bombing is echoed when the Gorman bellhop sets off an explosion in a hotel, a comparison Tony Gilroy himself acknowledged in Deadline.
This is the Russian Revolution, this is the Montagnard, this is something interesting that happened in the Haitian Revolution, this is the ANC. Oh, this is the Airgun Building, Palestine, this is the Continental Congress, this goes all the way. I mean, you could drop a needle in the last, I don't know what is recorded history, 3,000 years, legitimate recorded. I mean, slavery, oppression, colonialism, bad behavior, betrayal, heroism. I mean, it's a continuum.
But the peril also mentioned by Gilroy in that interview that demands our full attention, especially now, is Palestine. From the start of the season, the show signals this. Dedra Meero insists that to control Gorman, the Empire will need
Gorman rebels you can depend on to do the wrong thing.
It's a chilling echo of his admission that Israel propped up groups like Hamas to try to fracture Palestinian unity in groups like the PLO. This manipulation is a form of manufactured consent, leveraging internal divisions to justify larger acts of state violence. The Gormans are continually framed as terrorists, their resistance called inexplicable, their deaths rebranded as security.
There's been no statement or claim of credit from any local terrorist groups.
The KX units used in the Gorman massacre are terrifying, not just for their brute strength, but because they reflect the cold, impersonal violence of real-world militarized machines like drones and automated turrets that are used against civilians in places like Palestine by the IDF, or in America by our own police force. They embody the logic of occupation, unfeeling, unaccountable, and built to crush resistance without ever seeing who they kill as human beings. Imperial news broadcasts show ruined neighborhoods and call it justice, just as Western media has long painted Palestinians as inherently violent, erasing the context of occupation and American-backed apartheid and violence.
If Hamas laid down its weapons tomorrow, there would be no more fighting. If Israel laid down their weapons, there'd be no more Israel.
The checkpoints, blockades, bombed out streets, and propaganda painting the victims as subhuman all mirror the tactics of Israeli military control. The language is familiar too. Gormans are resistant to imperial norms.
The continued and inexplicable Gorman resistance to imperial norms. Many people, even some Gormans, have already been asking how long the Empire's patience can be tested, and here we are this morning with rumors of a general strike.
A line pulled straight from the Islamophobic playbook that casts Palestinians as uncivilized, undeserving of land, safety, sympathy, or life.
I'm not going to cry a fucking river when people who have genocide that's baked into their laws are getting genocided. I don't give a fuck. They're terrible people. These people are not your allies. They are not the same as us. They come from an inferior culture that is horrible. It kills people for their identity, and it is directly antithetical to everything Western values stand for, and it is an inferior culture in all ways.
Strip them of their humanity, say that they aren't civilized, and genocide becomes not just palatable, it becomes policy.
They're not voices raising the alarm about Gorman long ago. As the threat grew, did we not mark the arrival of every new Gorman provocation?
Imperial senators don't mourn the Gorman dead, they mourn imperial casualties, the ones that caused the violence.
We shall submit a list of our fallen imperial patriots, martyrs who gave everything on the brutal streets of Gorman.
We too lost a citizen yesterday on the Gorman Plaza. We too are grieving and wondering what more we might have done to stop this insurrection. I say, what will you tell your people when it is one of your citizens who have been slaughtered?
It's a mirror of every Western media cycle following an Israeli bombing campaign, where Palestinian children are buried under rubble while the world fixates on Israel's right to defend itself and the heroic actions of the IDF.
This was an act of sheer evil. More than 1,000 civilians slaughtered, not just killed, slaughtered in Israel. Among them, at least 14 American citizens killed. We must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel. We will make sure Israel has what it needs to take care of its citizens, defend itself, and respond to this attack.
Even in the Gore anthem, where we hear phrases like rings with echoes of from the river to the sea. It's a cry not for dominance, but for liberation, for land, for survival, against an empire built to erase them and try to take not just their resources, but their culture, their humanity. Similarly, the Empire's presence on Gorman is about extraction, stealing resources and displacing the native population. Like Israel, the Empire couches genocide in vague allusions to relocation.
800,000 Gormans.
Relocation would be ideal, but we need to plan for alternatives, all of which will require preparation.
A hollow pretense used to mask the violence of systematic annihilation.
Well, I think they should get a good, fresh, beautiful piece of land, and we get some people to put up the money to build it and make it nice and make it habitable and enjoyable and make it a home.
They don't want to leave, though. Palestinians say they don't want to leave.
I don't know how they could want to stay. It's a demolition site. It's a pure demolition site. If we could find the right piece of land or numerous pieces of land and build them some really nice places with plenty of money in the area, that's for sure, I think that would be a lot better than going back to Gaza, which has had just decades and decades of death.
Not to mention how forced relocation is a direct form of ethnic cleansing right from its definition, reflected not only in Israel's history with events like the Nakba and currently to this day, but also like America's treatment of indigenous tribes, forcing relocation through events like the Trail of Tears. But unlike Israel or America's settler colonialism, the Empire doesn't plan to live on Gorman. They make it clear Gorman will be rendered uninhabitable.
The extent of our withdrawal may render the planet unstable. It's gouge mining.
But that genocide also gets the Empire something else. As Eckhart's Ladder noted in this fantastic video that you should all check out, Gorman's destruction was never just about calcite. Krennic himself admitted that they could synthesize it.
Synthetic calcite, calcite alternatives, calcite substitutes.
Certainly, it was probably faster and easier to take it from the Gore, but in truth, the massacre wasn't logistical, it was ideological. It was a demonstration of state power executing a script written to justify genocide as a continual tool of control. Imperial news broadcasts speak of
questions are being asked about how an insurrection of this scale could be mounted without the aid and support of outside rebel assistance. In the days to come, as the Imperial martyrs of Gorman are mourned, we're sure to learn a great deal more about what happened here today and the price we'll pay for our own safety.
The massacre becomes propaganda, a manufactured crisis to solidify the Empire's narrative of perpetual threat, create an enemy within, strip away civil liberties, and justify further state violence under the guise of protection. See, the Death Star. Krennic and Palpatine in the Empire probably planned to frame its very existence when it's revealed to the public as necessary for Imperial safety, a preemptive weapon to root out terrorism before it can spread. Its eventual use on Alderaan in A New Hope would likely have been framed as done to destroy a hotbed of insurrection, teeming with stuck-up nobles like the Gormans and led by Senator Bail Organa, a known rebel sympathizer. A planetary genocide repackaged as necessary security. And those parallels aren't just with Gaza, they're happening right here in America. Just as the Star Wars prequels mirrored the Bush-era war on terror, where the Bush administration used the rhetoric of national defense to justify the expansion of executive power and a crackdown on civil liberties, Andor reflects the same recurring authoritarian pattern that repackaged fear as justification for repression. It highlights how calls for national security are often weaponized to centralize control, a logic echoed today in the Trump administration's own authoritarian impulses. The Trump administration has already begun labeling pro-Palestinian activists, especially immigrants, as anti-Semitic Hamas supporters.
Everybody knows they're anti-Semitic, and that's got to stop immediately.
Activists like Mahmoud Khalil have been detained by ICE, stripped of rights, and Trump himself called Khalil the first arrest of many, promising to deport terrorist sympathizers and boasting that they'll never return again.
If you tell us when you apply, hi, I'm trying to get into the United States on a student visa, I am a big supporter of Hamas, a murderous, barbaric group that kidnaps children, that rapes teenage girls, that takes hostages, that allows them to die in captivity, that returns more bodies than live hostages. If you tell us that you are in favor of a group like this, and if you tell us when you apply for your visa, and by the way, I intend to come to your country as a student, and rile up all kinds of anti-Jewish student, anti-Semitic activities. I intend to shut down your universities. If you told us all these things when you applied for a visa, we would deny your visa. I hope we would. If you actually end up doing that, once you're in this country on such a visa, we will revoke it.
Habeas corpus and due process get quietly suspended. Just for them, they say.
The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. So I would say that's an option we're actively looking at.
But that logic is never contained.
Omar Abrego Garcia is the face of the struggle to preserve the U.S. Constitution. His wife last saw him on video. This video. She recognized him from his tattoo. He's among dozens deported to a prison in El Salvador, despite the U.S. government admitting it was a mistake and the U.S. Supreme Court saying it should facilitate his return.
Trump's team has already said the same tactics will be expanded to U.S. citizens.
We also have homegrown criminals. I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country. But
this is how fascism works. Justify violence against the margins, then let that violence metastasize and expand. The trap is always the same. Treat it as acceptable there, and soon it becomes policy everywhere. Gorman wasn't just a massacre, it was a message, a performance, a blueprint, and it's a blueprint we've seen before, and it's being written again, right now.